I came here to save you.
The fortress is taken.
It is over.
Do not cite the deep magic to me, witch. I was there when it was written.
You're my only hope.
We shall fight on the beaches.
There will be days when we lose faith.
We band of brothers.
But take heart. Look around you. You're not in this fight alone.
I bid you stand! Men of the West!
Hey, everybody. Today we're going to talk about Clarkson's Farm Season 2, a show that I thoroughly enjoy. The three of them, Jeremy Clarkson, Richard Hammond, and James May, are some of the best stuff that ever happened to British television, let alone television in general. To start off with, I want to give a little bit of a story of how I got introduced to the great Jeremy Clarkson. So I had always known that Top Gear was the thing, and I knew about the Grand Tour when it came on, what do you call it, Amazon Prime, and I knew who these three guys were, but I'd never watched it. And come COVID, I got a job doing data entry for this place, and one of the guys that was working with me, we got the job at the same time, so we started the same day and all that. And one of these guys that was working with me started talking to me about cars and things like that. And I know enough about cars to, be able to contribute to the conversation and not just go, what does that mean? What does that mean? What does that mean? But he mentioned Top Gear, and I was just like, yeah, I've seen bits and pieces, but I've never watched an episode. I remember I don't really watch racing and stuff like that. And so he started watching it, and I just kind of picked it up. And I think I watched the entire Clarkson's episodes of Top Gear in like 3 weeks and moved on to the Grand Tour and then other stuff Richard Hammond did. And I think by then Our Man in Japan had come out and maybe May's cooking show, I think. And so I watched those, and I am all in on these three guys. I think Richard Hammond's workshop show that he's got is incredible. I think the Our Man In shows are great. I wish James May would do another cooking show because that was just a lot of fun to watch him like fail upwards almost in a good way. Sometimes it's fun to watch failure upwards. As I was getting ready to watch this season, I had a lot of concerns that it would not be able to stand up to the first season. I thought one of the things that made the first season so great was the lack of knowledge that Jeremy had. I did not think that watching the same episodes of cultivating and drilling would be as interesting as it was in the first season when he was learning how to do it. Now, of course, it's been a year, so Jeremy doesn't remember how to do any of it. So the times that we do get these cultivating or drilling episodes, or at least scenes in the episodes, it is still interesting and funny because it's Jeremy Clarkson being Jeremy Clarkson. And I did not think that more stories and stuff dealing with the sheep would be interesting because, as Caleb says, fuck the sheep. Though I was interested to see if Clarkson would try to either redo the wasabi that he tried to do in the first season, or if the water got fixed, because I couldn't, and even now can't remember whether or not they actually got the water fixed. I know he drives over there in the Bentley from A Massive Hunt to pull the water off the shelves, but I could never remember if they got the water fixed. But I was wrong. Season 2 is just as great as season 1. In fact, parts of it are even better. Now, the main difference between the seasons is that the first season was really about farming. And okay, so let me take that back. The first season was really about growing because it's all farming. And I think that's definitely something that this show taught me. When I thought about farmers, I really just thought about guys going out on their tractor, harvesting and planting. I genuinely did not know about the true difficulty of farming and just how much they rely on the weather. Like, I'd kind of heard about it, but I never really thought it was as prevalent as it was in the show. And obviously, in that first season with all the rains, it's a tad different just because of how remarkable all the rain was. But you still have to think about the fact that a week of rain in a lot of places is not uncommon. So having tight schedules and turnarounds that a lot of these farmers actually have, a week of rain can just destroy you. So it was really kind of an eye-opening show. And they show that in this season. In one of the episodes, Caleb and Jeremy go to the National Farmers Association awards dinner, and they're awarded the I forget what the award's called, but it's basically for promoting farmers and trying to show the world just how difficult farming is. The focus on this season is not on planting and harvesting, but on diversification. Now, it starts out with harvesting. They start harvesting durum wheat, which will be used to make pasta. And the diversification part is extremely important in this season because of Brexit. Regardless of the politics on Brexit, the facts are that the British farmers were going to lose, or at least Clarkson. Clarkson was going to lose £82,000 in subsidies that the EU was providing. Now, I don't know enough about farming and subsidies and all that kind of stuff to decide whether or not the government paying farmers to either not plant something or plant something is a good idea. I don't know, and I'm not going to take that up. The British government had told all these farmers that they needed to diversify, but they had also told them that they will guarantee all of the subsidies. Well, as is very clear and very obvious, that was a load of crock. And so throughout this season, we see just how difficult diversifying really is. Either because the thing that's going to help you diversify is too expensive, or because the laws and the city councils and the people of the towns don't want you to. So this season starts with Clarkson coming up with another preservation idea. And if you remember, in the first season, he had a couple of good ones and some really bad ones. The first bad one was the sheep. So he bought the sheep in order to have them mow some fields instead of spending the money on, and because we're talking about a British show, I'll call it petrol. Instead of spending the money on petrol and just mowing it himself, he thought, oh, I'll get sheep and they'll eat the grass and mow it for me, and I'll get money off of them from lamb and wool. Well, we all saw how that went. He got no money out of the wool, and though the lambs were very popular, I remember because I actually just rewatched both seasons like 2 days ago. The lambs went very fast when they finally were able to sell them. So, but I'm still pretty sure he lost out on that. The other preservation and natural thing ideas of his was that big pond thing down at the bottom that his girlfriend and Charlie and Caleb got angry at him for basically just destroying the land while he was trying to build it. And then the bees and the little walkway things for the spiders and insects to get into the fields. So we start the season with him having some new ideas. First, he got a whole lot more bees, which is great because I don't think there's anything to argue over the fact that losing bees is a bad thing because they're one of the main pollinators. So we need more bees. Preferably not, around my front door, but yeah, we need more bees. So he decides to get cows, and he admits that the sheep were a disaster. And so he and Charlie are talking, and he lays out the idea of getting cows because their feces will help revitalize the soil because of nitrogen and having to prevent or allowing them not to have to spray the fields with nitrogen or something. That's part of the science that I just don't understand. And the great thing about the show is it doesn't really rely on you to understand all the science behind farming. It puts it out there so that anyone that does understand it will see the reason, but then anyone that doesn't can still be entertained. So he decides to get cows and chickens. Well, more chickens because he already had chickens. And use the chickens to eat the insects out of the cowpats and then stamp the cowpats into the ground, which apparently releases nitrogen and makes the soil all good again. He also comes up with another great idea for diversification, and it's to create a restaurant in the old lambing barn, which, if you remember, was rather close to the farm shop. So he decides to make this restaurant, and in the restaurant, he's going to sell stuff from his farm. So the beef will come from his cows, the pasta, they'll use the durum wheat that he just harvested to make pasta and all this other great stuff. And to kind of jump ahead further in the season, he realizes that the restaurant won't just help his farm, but he forms a sort of cooperative to allow other struggling farmers to sell off some of their livestock and vegetables and milk so that they can make part of the profit as well, which is an amazing idea when you think about it, because Clarkson can only grow so many things and you can only have so much pasta and beef, even though I'd love to just live off of that. Eventually someone's going to want chicken, or someone's going to want pork or fish or some vegetables. And so having these other farmers that can help with that is a great idea to have. So lucky for Clarkson, who knows, I think I said earlier, knows nothing about cows. Charlie Ireland is on his side, and Charlie is a lot cooler in this season. I remember being kind of annoyed with him constantly being pro rule. And even in this season, he's still a bit, and don't forget, the rule says, but you can really see the frustration that he has with the farm politics and the politics of the local councils and how difficult it's going to be for him and the other farmers in the area to continue to make a living with the loss of these subsidies and the complete lack of information UK government provides. And that's all. A lot of that is really within the first 30 or 40 minutes of the first episode. So during this season, the antagonist, now last season, if you had to pick an antagonist, it's probably the weather. It's probably God. The weather really messed with Clarkson last season. This season, the antagonist is 100% his local city council. The the Oxfordshire City Council. And it's a group of what looks like about 10 men and women pretty much drunk on power and determined to continue living in the 19th century and keep any form of progress or farm diversification or anything that's going to bring one extra car to their sleepy little countryside away from their town. And that's the problem, because you've got a couple of people that are really upset with the farm shop, and one guy that apparently has the money to really fight. And it definitely makes it definitely makes for some great television. But the problem is that it's also real. So these people are just they've decided that they want to pick a fight with Clarkson. They don't like him, and they are going to use any means in their possession to stop him from any form of progress. So a lot of the side stories, like the cows, some of the other plants, it's really to, I won't say add fluff, because the main storyline is the restaurant and how they're going to build it and whether they can build it and stuff like that. But it's to kind of add additional stories. So it's not as interesting. It's fun to watch, but there's not, you definitely know what the main storyline of this season is when you watch it. So the first kind of politicking that Jeremy deals with is basically just he gets a huge list of complaints when they first pitch the idea of a restaurant. And he's basically a guy who goes smooths the town. And so there's a lot of stuff he does. He gives some people some seeds from his wildflower fields, which are apparently incredibly valuable. It's the most valuable thing on his farm. And then he decides to have like this town meeting where he sits down and addresses all the concerns. And unfortunately, they weren't actually able to film the meeting, but they did film Caleb and Charlie's reaction to basically eavesdropping through an open window. And it's pure gold. It's absolutely hilarious. And then the second antagonist is the Badger. Now, the Badger is the most legislative and protected animal in the UK. And it was apparently to prevent something called badger baiting, which I have no idea what that is, and I don't even really want to look it up. I imagine it has something to do with hunting badgers. But apparently it's not a problem anymore. And like always, the government has not caught up. So the problem with badgers is they carry TB, tuberculosis. And tuberculosis can destroy cows. Well, Clarkson's got cows now. So this is a big problem. And you actually see him kind of be human for quite a couple moments during this season when he talks to the cow farmer that supplies his shop with milk and milkshakes, because she's got a herd of 120 dairy cows, but they've been riled with TB. So they've had to put down like half their herd. So they're not viable. And so you just kind of feel this sadness for these people who you have no idea who they actually are, but you see the real struggle of farming. And that's really what makes Clarkson's farm beautiful in a way. And I know I'm kind of sounding like I'm overwhelmed or somewhat, but it's a show that really has done an amazing job of taking this thing that I think a lot of people who don't live on a farm or in a farming community take for granted, and really shows us the difficultness and daily lives. Maybe not the daily lives, because it's not like it says, day 1, Clarkson does this, day 2, day 3. It's more, over months. But even just knowing that, like Caleb Cooper, for instance. Okay, sure, Caleb Cooper's getting paid by Amazon. Okay, he's also getting paid by Clarkson. He also has this contracting business. He also, in the first season, he talks about how he has a couple chickens and a couple sheep, and I think he said something about having some pigs. So there's a 22-year-old kid that I hope is making a lot of money and having a good life, but he's still a farmer. He's still getting on that tractor and farming the different fields for Clarkson. These aren't today's country singers who wear a cowboy hat and pretend like they're farmers and country folk. They're not living in $10 million mansions, driving expensive cars and lifted trucks just to act like they're country or act like they're farmers. These are real people doing real farming. And sure, Jeremy Clarkson is Jeremy Clarkson. But despite what one guy in the town says during his schmoozing fest, he's a farmer. And as much as I wish he'd go back and do full seasons of the Grand Tour again, he's a farmer. And he really seems to enjoy it. And that's one of the things that I really like about this. So rant over. Let's talk about the rest of the season. So as I'm sure you can probably imagine, Clarkson gets denied planning permission. The city council is constantly against him. He does have a couple allies on the council, but it's totally against him. And so he basically decides that he's going to appeal to the federal government. He's going to call up the Secretary of State and say, we got to fix this. He's going to appeal to the Secretary of State. I appeal to Caesar. It doesn't happen, though, because as we find out, this is going to be a £500,000 venture to appeal. Now, what's ridiculous about that is Clarkson basically says he can't afford that. And he's Jeremy Clarkson. So what that really goes to show is think about all the other farmers who they get denied planning permission. Appealing is nowhere even in their thought because there's no way in hell they can afford that. It's ridiculous. The whole system is corrupt and needs to be wiped out. But that can't happen. So they decide that they're going to scheme. And I love it. Clarkson has a meeting with, I think it's his girlfriend. And he basically says, we need to live in a murky gray area of loopholes. And it's beautiful because even though they deny planning permission so this is what's crazy. So they first deny planning permission for the restaurant, which has a lot of stuff tied into it, including a parking lot. So when they deny planning permission, they deny planning permission for the parking lot. So Charlie has to go back and send in another application to build a parking lot. They deny that, saying you'll ruin the area of outstanding natural beauty, which is a big legal term over there. And so he's like, okay, well, dang. So they find a loophole. This is the first loophole. They're able to basically use different fields for 28 days. They can set up a parking lot in this field next to the shop for 28 days. Then after that, they can put the parking lot across the road in that field. Then they can put the parking lot on the other field further down. Then they can put the parking lot on the other side of the shop. So because Clarkson's got a lot of these farms and a lot of these fields, there's some great loopholes there. But the best loophole comes when Clarkson basically has to go tell his builder that they can't build the shop. And the builder gives them the loophole, basically says, you could build it over on that barn because that's been there for 100 years. And after 10 years, you can do whatever the hell you want. So they're like, oh my God, we've got it. We know how to do it. And so they're all getting ready. They're drawing up plans. They're making sure that it actually is something they can do. And then one of the things they do to prepare for this is they build a farm track, which is a road on your farm. It's not asphalt or anything. It's just basically a dirt and rock road, patted down so driving on it isn't difficult. And they're building it. They send in I don't even think it's asking for planning permission from the city council. It's basically hey, just we're building a road on our farm. And the city council says, no, can't do it. Not necessary. And apparently that's unheard of. They make a point of showing Clarkson and Ireland have this conversation. And Clarkson says, have you ever heard of a farmer being denied planning permission to build a farm tract? And Charlie says, no, never. As you know, Charlie works for a bunch of different farmers. He does planning permissions forms for a bunch of farmers. So he knows these processes in and out. And then when Ireland tells him he didn't get planning permission, Clarkson goes, I can't build, says so the royal you, farmers, can't build a farm tract. And Ireland makes it clear, no, you can't build a farm tract. So it's very clear the city council is now going to war against Clarkson. And so they decide that they are not going to do anything until a specific time with this restaurant that they're building. They're going to wait a certain number of days because Clarkson's got to do a bunch of stuff. And then they're going to send in the information, and within 48 hours, the restaurant will be up and running. And they're doing this to prevent the city council from basically coming back and saying, well, no. Even though you have the legal right and authority to do that, it's not viable, so you definitely can't do it because that's just stupid. And the point of this is so that they can say, but we are doing it, so it is viable, so you're wrong. Now, that's how the show ends. This season ends with them succeeding in building the restaurant, launching it, having a great menu, people really enjoying it, and the whole gang getting together and having a beer. Oh, I did miss one thing. One of the other things he does is he invests in a local brewery, and they use the spring barley that he makes to make the beer. And it's called Hawkstone Beer, based off of this really ancient Neolithic rock near the farm. And I'll tell you right now, I'm very interested in trying it because apparently James May and Richard Hammond have both started their own liquors, and they're supposed to both be really good. So I'm really interested in trying Clarkson's. Unfortunately, I live in the States and they're not shipping over here yet, but I am on the email list to find out when they do, and I will be buying both kinds, their cider and their lager. I'm very excited to try it. Now, some further news. According to LAD Bible, Clarkson has finally accepted the council's decision to close his restaurant. Now, what happened here was, and let me see if I can get to the part of the article. As seeing the show, they had been having a back and forth ever since July 2022, which is actually when just after the season starts, I believe. So he gets like I said, he gets the application rejected. They find a delightful little loophole. So the idea was to kind of operate the same way a lot of Britain's seaside towns operate and just be open for a couple of days each week during the summer. Here we go. So at the time of the opening, the Diddley Squat restaurant received a list of orders from the West Oxfordshire District Council, which needed to be completed within 6 weeks of the notice being served. So the deadline passed, and the council said, okay, what you've done is not enough. So part of the notice was removing all mobile toilets, tables for dining, and landscaping materials, as well as stating that the farm shop could only sell products grown on the farm itself or within a 16-mile radius. Now, the problem with this is, as I read that, what they're saying is, oh, you can have this restaurant, but you can't have tables, you can have chairs, or mobile toilets. Well, so what you're basically doing is saying I can't have a restaurant, even though I can. And one of the other issues they had was that Clarkson was selling his book at the farm shop. Well, while the book may have been written at his kitchen table, it wasn't made within 16 miles of the shop. So it's kind of two different ways of reading the rule. And as we all know, the council's way of reading the rule is what's going to win. So he has, I thought there was a quote. So agents who work on behalf of Diddley Squat deemed the requirements to be too excessive and added that the map provided by the council in their notice was inaccurate, causing the entire notice to be invalid. They also believe 6 weeks wasn't long enough, and 6 months would have been a more gracious time period. So unfortunately, the shop is now closed. Or sorry, not the shop. The restaurant is closed. Hopefully something changes there. Hopefully everyone can get along and figure out how to help all these farmers, because that's really what Clarkson's trying to do here. He's just trying to find a way to help all the farmers in the area, including himself. But should we crucify the guy just because he's going to benefit from this? The other really good news that I saw just prior to watching the show was right down here that the reports that Clarkson's farm had been axed and that Jeremy and Amazon were moving away from each other are apparently wrong. Couple weeks ago, there were a bunch of reports that Amazon had decided to move away from Jeremy Clarkson over his article about Meghan Markle, which, whether or not you think it's a good or bad article, was definitely the slowest burn in a while. I mean, he wrote the article like, I think 3 months ago in like November or something like that, and nothing really happened. And then, 2 or 3 months later, people got really pissy about it, as they do, and tried to get him quote unquote canceled. Now, for someone that people have been trying to get canceled for 20 years now, I hope Clarkson didn't bat an eye. So Clarkson took to Twitter to say he apologized, and then there were fans like right here. Rhino Excavator Hammer said, "I loved watching it on Saturday that just passed. Loved the show. Can't wait for season 3 if there is one." And Clarkson confirmed there will be a season 3. It was not canceled. It's not being canceled. So I'm all aboard. Let's go. Can't wait. And in the meantime, we've got more. We've got more the Grand Tour coming, more our man in. He's going to James May is going to India. That's going to be really interesting. And hopefully we get more Richard Hammond's workshop. I might do a video about all of them later. But so that's where we are with Jeremy Clarkson and season 2 of Clarkson's Farm. It's a great watch. Go watch it. It's awesome. As always, please like and subscribe to our channel. Click the bell. You'll get alerted whenever we post new stuff or we go live with stuff. And follow us on Twitter at KingsAdvisors_.